the 100th Infantry Division.
And in which war did you serve?
It was in World War II, in the European theater, the ETO.
And what was the highest rank you achieved?
Isn't that? Can you? Technical sergeant.
And all right,
That's 3-star, three bands on the top and 2 on the bottom.
3 up, 2 down.
Yeah, 3 up, 2 down. Yeah.
And what general locations did you serve? What countries in Europe?
France and Germany.
Now let's start at the beginning of your story, Mr. Schuman.
Yeah.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
And where were you living at the time?
I was living in Passaic, P-A-S-S-A-I-C, New Jersey.
And do you recall the date or the year that you enlisted?
It was 1943, in November of 1943.
Now, why did you join the service?
I felt obligated to join the service. I felt it very necessary with the Axis in Germany becoming stronger and stronger and taking over many of those countries in Europe. And I felt a need to serve my country.
And why did you select the Army more than any? Why were you more interested in that than any other service?
I thought, in the back of my mind, thought that the Army would be better suited for my type of personality. I don't like ships too much, and I thought that it would be best if I stayed on the ground.
And fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, what were your first days of service like? After you enrolled in the Army, did you go straight to boot camp? Were you able to go?
Well, we went to Fort Dix.
Okay.
And there, the transition took place. They removed all of our civilian clothing, issued all of our Army, the necessary equipment we needed in clothing.
Mm-hmm.
They gave us an Army classification test, which I think had a significant role sometimes in where they would place you in the service.
Now, after you took that test, what particular military occupational specialty did they have in mind for you?
Well, it wasn't exactly at that particular time. We had 6 weeks of basic training, and at that particular time, they would try to review the test that you took, your background, if you had any college background, and they would try to assign you to where they felt you would fit emotionally and with technically and so forth. So it took place after basic training.
So how did it feel to be in basic training, that transition from civilian life?
The regimentation was a little difficult to get used to, but when I look back, I think the influence was with all the other 34 men I had in the barracks with me. There were very little complaints. We just did what we had to do. We accepted the regimentation. I enjoyed the outdoors. We did a lot of exercising and instruction. So I felt that I just fit in. And I think at 18, your mindset is different anyway,
So were most of the men in your barracks draftees or volunteers?
I would say most were draftees. Most were draftees, yes.
And was there a difference in outlook you really noticed between draftees or volunteers?
No, I didn't notice. I know that the morale was very good. I don't know of anybody who felt the stress of the transition. Now, they might have, but of the people that I was closely knit with, I didn't detect anything like that at all.
So, would you care to tell me about some of your boot camp and training experiences? Do any particular memories come to mind?
Yes, I do. I could. Basic training was, we got used to the regimentation, getting up at 6 with the roll call and whatever, and I didn't mind the food at all. And I can go on after basic training if you think that would be significant, or do you want to stick to that? The basic training. I sort of enjoyed. I never was handled too many firearms, and that was interesting because they started with a 22, and then we went up to an M1, and then we handled machine guns. So I found that very interesting, actually, and I enjoyed that part of it.
Do you recall what specific firearms you qualified on?
The carbine, M1. Those are the only two that required a grade, or so they were interested in those two weapons. We didn't fire any 45 pistols. It was mostly the M1 and the carbine.
Were you as an NCO later in your career? Were you issued a 45?
No, I wasn't. I had my M1 during the whole time, but as the story goes on, I think you'll understand why. Okay.
Okay. Now, do you remember any of your basic training instructors?
We had a Ostrowski, Lieutenant Ostrowski, Lieutenant Kerr, Kerr, and let me see, Getty, Sergeant Getty, Getty, and the company commander was Alden Small.
And any particular memories of any of those gentlemen?
Inclusive of doing basic, or you want to include the?
Or did they follow you later on in your military service?
No, they didn't. None of them that I had basic training with ended when we were reassigned. There wasn't anybody who I took basic training with. Okay. They were scattered over the entire division.
And so it sounds like you were able to get through basic all right. Were you able to keep in touch with your family at all?
Yes, we could make a phone call. Writing letters was the primary way of communication. We would get I think we had, after basic training, I don't recall, we had, I think we had 10 days after basic training to go back home.
So after boot camp, where were you deployed to?
Well, we stayed and trained for about 16 months. We stayed at Fort Jackson in South Carolina, going through all types of classes and so forth. Then we went to on Tennessee maneuvers, which was a simulated battleground. They divided the infantry into a red and green. And we went to Fort Bragg for additional training.
That sounds like quite an extensive training regimen.
Yes. In spite of the fact that the government was in need of infantry troops all over the world, actually, I have to give them credit. They did not cut back on any of the necessary education and training that the men needed. They did not rush through getting that 100th Division overseas.
And I'm sure those skills came in handy later.
Yes, they did. Well, after basic training, when I said that that's when they decided to filter out the group and assign them to whether it be artillery or platoon or whatever it might be. I was very fortunate in that if you're interested in that part of the story,
Absolutely.
after basic training,
Yes.
okay. After basic training, I had a year of college, and I was majoring in art.
Okay.
Okay.
And how did that affect your MOS?
It affected me to a degree that really led me to a fantastic position in the service.
What was your duty?
I was the head cartographer in the G3 section.
G3 is intelligence?
Yes. That came about in a very interesting way that after basic training, I was assigned to division headquarters at the 100th Division, but I didn't have a specific position at that time. I just went through the daily exercises and regimentation, but I didn't know where I was going. And one day, the Captain Small called me in. He said, "I see you have a year of art background. Do you think you can draw some things?" And I said, "I think I can." So he handed me a manual and he checked off what he wanted. And I said, "Well, where do you want me to do this?" He said, "Well, we have a big hall. There's going to be a tremendous meeting. All the top brass is going to be there, and it's an instruction for all the officers and enlisted men. There's going to be about 300 people, so the drawings have to be pretty large." So he brought me into the hall, and they had paper that was 11 feet tall. And I had to draw all these images on there. But this, no, I know it sounds like a fairy tale, but I'm telling you, obviously, I'm telling you how this happened. And I did a very good job. And in the back of the room was a lieutenant colonel. His name was Eklund. And the next day, the captain called me into the orderly room and he said, "This private?" I said, "Yes." He says, "You have to report tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in the G3 section. You have to see Lieutenant Colonel Eklund." I said, "Yes, sir." So 9 o'clock, I went there, and the colonel, I think he could frighten King Kong, you know. He was a regular Army man and a no business kind of officer, you know. He said to me, "I like what I saw, and I'm going to assign you to my unit." And he sent me to, I spent about a month and a half learning all about cartography and aerial photo class where you study photos taken from up above. And Army signals, Army identification markers, German symbols, and how to convert miles into kilometers, because the Jeeps didn't have that change, so you had to be careful what you were doing. But anyway, I really had a wonderful job in the service.
How did they teach you to estimate height and range from aerial photography?
It was done with grid marks. You see, these were not relief maps that we work with. They don't have relief maps. We had a regular road map that you get from the state of Connecticut. But the more sophisticated ones have height of maybe areas that would go around a high ground, would have circles around it, and each line would indicate the footage of that high ground. So if you had 10 of those circles around it, and it was each one was 2 feet, then you know that hill is 20 feet. The only significant thing about the aerial photos, you can see shadows.
Right.
That's very important. And if a cannon is hidden in the woods, it has to be further back than 20 feet. Because anything less than 20 feet, no matter what the day, will show a shadow on the ground of an image back there. And I didn't believe that until we worked with the aerial photo maps.
So every gun crew knew
Knew
to place their gun 20 feet back?
More than 20 feet back, or a big tank or something like that.
That's interesting. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that's what the aerial photos were showing me. They showed me the image of a German Tiger tank, that wasn't 20 feet back. And there you can see the whole image, no matter if it's cloudy, sunny, raining, it makes no difference.
So, do you recall anything else about your cartography training that came in handy when you were in Europe?
Yes, there wasn't any sophisticated materials that we used. This is another thing that people are shocked to hear. The maps were maps were mounted on 4x8 plywood, which were mobile. They were on stands. And the room where these maps appear is called the war room, in technical terms. Those maps, when we went overseas, were put on a 2.5-ton truck.
Okay.
It didn't have any windows. It was like a small van, moving van. On one wall was a map that showed an area of maybe 100 miles. And the other wall was a map that showed maybe 20 or 30 miles, like a 1 to 50,000 inch. So the images were much larger. Those are the maps that we used when we were making the attack orders.
So would that truck keep up with the infantry?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there was always a distance, obviously.
Right.
But it was mobile. When the 100th Division did a wonderful job. I respect everything that these guys did. When there was I would say, a tactical distance between the front line and our headquarters, we would move pretty close to the front lines.
Now, was this 2.5-ton truck, was that your vehicle?
That was my vehicle. I rode in that. I drove it. I had a driver, and I slept in that. In that truck.
It's the smallest mobile home I've ever heard of.
That was nice. It was beautiful, I had television, I had a refrigerator, and they filled it up. Well, I had a wonderful time there.
That's not bad.
Yeah. When we were in an area where the house was accessible, I would sleep in one of the German homes that had been cleared. Most of the time, I slept on the truck because the general would come in anytime, and he would, it made no difference of time. He would come in 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning if he had to.
So would you be perpetually preparing maps?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I would be indicating information that was coming in from all the liaison officers, from units that were to our left flank and from units to our right flank. 44th Division could have been on our left flank. 177th Recon could have been on our right flank. I also disseminated the information that they would bring in.
So how fresh would this intelligence be?
It would be.
Like how
would.
Can you describe how information would get from the front line to you?
Okay, the front line. Okay. The front line, it was a chain of command, and this is what it sounds like, a textbook philosophy, but it really worked. No phones, no cell phones, no radio, no telephones. Okay. Company commander, you have 4 commands. You have a company commander,
okay,
battalion commander, a regimental commander,
okay,
division headquarters. They all have the same map.
So
The company commander would get as much as he could from platoon leaders, which could vary. That was the toughest way to get information, as you well know. I mean, a platoon guys could lose 20 men, and then the information wouldn't get back. But if there was a breakthrough, they would know about that.
right.
That's why the maps were was a key weapon that we had. And I wrote the article, and I can't marvel at how this worked, but it really, really, truly worked. The company commander would go to the battalion commander and say, "Here it is, I lost one platoon. The Germans haven't infiltrated." He'd give that information to battalion. Battalion brings it in regimental headquarters. Regimental headquarters has a cartographer. He enters what the company and battalion commanders bring in on his map. Then a liaison officer from regimental headquarters hops in a jeep, and then he rides to our headquarters, and he gives me his information, and it could be with using coordinates.
So were you at the company level or the division?
No, I was division.
Division.
I was with the generals, with general staff. G3 is the general staff.
Okay. And I remember you told me off camera, but for the sake of the interview, why wouldn't you be in radio contact with the platoons?
Interception. Germans can intercept radio. So everything had to be done by courier, liaison people. That's it. There was no other way of transmitting the information. And when I look back in those days, I was 19. I didn't realize the significance of all of this, but now that I've been out all these years and I've had contact with the colonel and so forth, I realized what a great bunch of guys I was with. I really mean that. They were absolutely fantastic.
So when you shipped out of the United States?
Yeah, that was a...
Where did you go to England first?
No, we went straight to Marseille, France. Now that was an interesting venture too. There were...
Tell me about it.
There were... there might have been 16,000 on the ship. It was the George Washington, which was a captured German luxury ship from World War I.
So
I would put luxury with a question mark. But it's also the ship that President Harry Truman went over to World War I. Yeah, he was a lieutenant in the infantry there. We did nothing on the ship because the men were so crowded that all we did was sleep and eat. That's all we could do.
How long did it take you to get to France?
14 days. We ran into a North Atlantic storm that was unbelievable. But we would sleep with our clothes on, and there were 4 bunks, and you could hardly move your head because the next guy was like that. We had to sleep with our clothing on.
Right.
We could take our shoes off. We get up in the morning, we get our mess kits, we'd stand in line, and the Army, whether it be an act of Congress years ago, I don't know, but the service people have to be, by law, fed 3 times a day when possible.
So 3 times a day you get in that long line?
One, we only got twice. You get up in the morning with your mess kit, and they would put breakfast and lunch on the same mess kit. You'd eat that, you'd stand in line, and you'd go around, and then you'd have dinner. So that's all you did was stand in line and eat and sleep. That's all you could do.
So what was it like adjusting to land again after you got off?
I didn't get seasick at all going over. The only thing that we never had an exercise climbing down those cargo nets. Right. On the side of the boat. That was frightening because the fellow on top of me, he fell off, and he knocked my rifle right off my shoulder. And there's no way of retrieving him. He would drown because too much equipment on him. So I don't even think they made an attempt. Maybe afterwards. I don't know about that. So we landed on Marseille, and then we marched to a place called the Calais, CALAIS staging area.
And did you go over as a replacement? Or
No.
Did you go over? Okay.
I was
with 100.
I went over with my original people. Yeah.
And from that staging area, was that the point where you got your deuce and a half and prepared to?
We organized the. We had to make sure we all got together, and you know, the manner in which they were able to distribute the equipment was miraculous.
Did you come over with everything, with all your trucks and all
No. I think there might have been some essential equipment there. There might have been some rifles. There might have been some ammunition, hand grenades, things of that nature that the guys needed right away.
Right.
Medical supplies, but after a day, there was our truck with the maps on it, ready to go. It was amazing. It really was. And then we were there for 3 days, and then we relieved the 45th Division. They had been in combat quite a while.
Now, what was a typical day in the service like for you? Once you got your vehicle and the 100th, where were you sent with the 100th Division? Like from Marseille, where did you go?
From Marseille, we relieved the 45th Division in Rambouillet, France. Okay, I can show you how to spell that. And that we stayed with the 100th Division right straight through the Alsace into Stuttgart, Germany. And that was our last. That's where VE Day, 18 months later, we were in Stuttgart, Germany.
Now, what was a typical day in the service like for you?
Well, we had several different occasions. I slept on the truck, so I would get up very early, go out and get breakfast. We always had. I have to keep being repetitious, but the supply was just uncanny. I don't think people realized, with the distance from the States to there, how wonderful the organization, the military, the Navy, all of them were able to get all of those supplies. But the typical day for me, I would sleep in the van. I'd get up early, go out and get my breakfast, because I never knew when the general would be coming in with his staff. His name was General Burris, Burress. And he would come in after I posted the information that was given to me by the liaison officers, and he would study that. And he would study the disposition of the troops, the disposition of the troops to our left flank and to our right flank, to make sure that you couldn't have any opening areas. So those things were all coordinated. And there was one breakthrough one time. Germans came in and we had a lot of casualties. And I was in the van. This was like 4 a.m, and I heard a lot of activity out of the war room, and there was an MP standing by the door, and once in a while a fellow by the name of Tim Wilkins was the MP who was in the van with me. I looked out, and there were all the regimental commanders were there, and they weren't in a jovial mood at all. And finally one of them came in, and he said, "You have your overlay, Sergeant?" And I said, "Yes, I do, from yesterday." and I knew that there was trouble, and I was really worried about something. It was awful atmosphere. He said, "You want me to do me a favor? Can you put your overlay on the map?" And I said, "Yes, I will." So I took the overlay. We could only make 12 copies.
Okay.
Okay. And I always kept a couple. And then in addition with the maps that went out, we also had a stenographer, and he would type information. But I didn't want to divest from this story. But anyway, this colonel came in and he says to me, "You have the overlay from yesterday's attack orders?" I said, "Yes, sir." "Could you put it on the map, please?" I put it on the map. And I knew right away that I was really concerned, because I knew that now there's a problem, see. So I put my overlay on the map, and my coordinates were perfect. It had laid the cross marks, it divided into tents, everything was right there. He said, "Thank you, Sergeant," and he walked out. What happened was that breakthrough of the German infiltrating who caused a lot of casualties. When my overlay went down to regimental headquarters, he mounted it on his map. His map shrunk. So the cartographer down there, he forced it to fit on the coordinates. He moved it. Now you move that a quarter inch, you got about a half mile opening there. So he, instead of reporting that my coordinates don't match my map, he gave it a little shifteroo on there, and the guy was court-martialed. He didn't, and now they came back. We found out that the maps had shrunk from moisture, and there was a difference between the two. So I sort of felt sorry for the guy. I guess he didn't realize, that it's paper and all that. But that's how we had no other way of checking.
It's a hard lesson to learn.
It's a hard lesson to learn. Yeah. And my colonel wasn't there either. He was up at corps headquarters, because he would have sort of cooled things down for me. And unless I was wrong, then goodbye, Charlie, and you end up in the front lines. But anyway, that was the only time with all of them we made, we never had a problem. So the Corps of Engineers issued all new maps.
And what were the new maps made out of?
Paper.
Okay.
But they were shrink proof or something like that. Don't forget there's moisture, and we had rain and snow, and it's a hard thing to control. But I guess from that point on, we would divide a grid into 10 parts, 10 equal parts. So in addition to the longitude and latitude, you had to break that down into 10 parts. So if it was 101, then and then you go 2, 3, 4 up to 10.
Right.
You'd have to they would have to match everything. Everything would have to match. And you give so in other words, if I could put what I did, I would put landmarks on there or in there. I would put a bridge or a farmhouse.
These would help with the scale.
And that would help to make the adjustment. See, if the fellow in the regiment had noticed that the farmhouse was off a 1/16 of an inch or whatever, he would have understood then that there's something wrong with these maps,
Right.
But that happens.
So, did you ever see combat?
I was up to the lines many times, and then I had an experience which look, I don't want to make myself a hero. You understand? You're asking me, and I'm telling you the true story here. The colonel, during the Battle of the Bulge, the colonel sent me to Corps headquarters.
So you were in Belgium?
No, we were in Germany.
Okay.
That's Germany. The colonel sent me to Corps headquarters with a set of maps. And why we had 3 officers and 6 enlisted men. That's all G3.
Okay.
G3 had the commander and 3 assistant officers and 5 enlisted men. That was G3 right there. He sent me to Corps headquarters. I had to travel at night with a set of maps. And I had to make a route, converting the kilometers into miles or miles into kilometers, I forget. But I used the wheel and I got that organized. In Europe, every 15 miles, they have markers on the side of the road. Just stones. So if you move from A to B on the road, it's 16 miles, which is very helpful when I traveled at night. And I had a driver by the name of Joe Gobe. And I traveled out, no lights. And I would look, and I would travel 15 miles. I would get out of the car, out of the Jeep, and I'd look to see if there was a marker. And I made one trip to Corps headquarters uneventful. On the second trip, we were briefed on the fact that the German had roadblocks out, and to be careful when you made a turn. You make a turn, stop, and get out of the Jeep because their roadblocks would be on the current. You make that turn, you've had it. And so the first trip was uneventful. I went to Corps headquarters. We stayed overnight, and then Joe and I drove back during the day. About a week later, he sent me again, and we had a lot of turns in the road. We stopped the Jeep. We get out of the Jeep. They blew up the Jeep. And Joe and I were in the woods 13 hours, getting away from them if we could. Now, we were finally picked up by a American task force. It was a M1 tank and a command car. And the officer's name was Riley. They called him Task Force Riley.
Now, how did they find you, or did you just see?
Well, no, we kept the first thing. We were scared because, hey, we were 2 guys. I didn't know how many Germans were at the roadblock. So we grabbed the rifle and our bandolier of ammo, and we just ran as fast as we could into the woods to get away.
Were you pursued, or did they chase you?
They did. We didn't. I don't think so. Because that was the time where I figured this is it for me. I'm not going to get home now. I was really upset at that one. We ran like a son of a gun. We were in the woods 13 hours. Well, obviously we got away, and then I knew that there was a highway, and we got to the edge of the wooded area, and we heard this tank coming up, and it was an M1, and they took us back. They took us in the Corps headquarters. Yeah.
I'm sure you were pretty relieved to see that.
I was really relieved to see them. I'll tell you. Again, I'm no hero. I'm just telling you the way the story went. I wish that I saw Joe. See, most of us are gone. Actually, we had to not dismantle. we had to dissolve our 100th Division organization because the turnout gets so limited that there was enough going to the conventions. We had in the early days we had 700 come to the convention. Then it ended up the last one there were only 125.
Now you said you'd made numerous trips to the front lines. Did you see any other combat?
No, I didn't see any other combat. I went to the front line several times, but it was on just to verify some things. But I saw no combat after that.
Now, were there any casualties in your unit?
No,
And were you ever awarded any medals or citations?
I got the Bronze Star.
So the Bronze Star, and it's also quite an achievement to make tech sergeant in 2 years. That's, so did you advance through rank very rapidly?
Pretty much. I was a staff when I went over, and then I got the third stripe when I was overseas.
And were you ever wounded? Did you sustain any injuries
No,
during the service?
no.
And how did you stay in touch with your family while you were overseas?
Just by letter form. That's all.
And you said that you were very well supplied in terms of food, ammunition.
Everything we ever needed, and even with the material I needed in the war room, with the indelible pens, the paper. We had everything we needed there. There was never any shortage. And the food, no matter what, we always had something. Either a C ration if things got tight, or a K ration. We had that.
So would you usually be served meals from a mobile mess, or did you pretty much live off of C and K rations?
Well at certain times we had mostly C and K, but then we for the most part they would set up a kitchen. And we would have regular chow that was served to everybody in all of Europe, and so it was good. They even had hot chocolate once in a while.
So did you ever feel pressured or stressed?
Only that one time when they had the problem with the map. I can remember going through a very worrisome period because I knew the thing that bothered me most of all was the colonel had a lot of confidence in me, and I felt that I would have let him down, and he was a difficult guy to work with. I tell you, he was a no nonsense. They were afraid of him anyway. Anybody he outranked was. He was terrible. But he was a darn good officer, I'll tell you that much.
So how did it feel knowing that, that you saw or you heard from your firsthand experience, how important your job was to map everything exactly right?
Yes.
How
Yeah.
did that feel at the time while you were preparing every map?
You can't anticipate. You were still immature to a degree, but I was instructed well with the preparation for this, and it wasn't that difficult. You just had to make sure that you got the phase lines right, the coordinates right, any Army symbol that had to be there was there, and then there were written instructions that went along with that. So I felt pretty confident during the whole time. I didn't have any problem at all.
And just to go back real quick.
Yes.
What were the circumstances that you were awarded the Bronze Star?
my overall performance and the thing that motivated the colonel doing this was a combination of things. After VE Day, he called me into his office, if you can call it an office, and he said to me, I want you to write a history of the division. This is just the way he is. He didn't mince words. But again, he had confidence in his staff. And then he said to me, I would like you to write a history of the division. Remember, I'm only 19 years old. He says, I want you to do it with a series of maps. I said, okay. And that meant that I had to get the maps that we never threw any maps away. We had them all rolled up. Every time we moved, we had to, so we had all of those. So I had to start taking it from the minute we relieved the 45th Division in Rambo Villas 18 months prior. All right? And then we had to get daily reports. If you recall, we had a stenographer in the van who would write the attack orders. And they were called daily reports.
And the combination of the two became the methodology for the history.
For the production of the maps, and I'm going to show you the set of maps. It took me 3 months to do this. I worked 12 hours a day. Now, how'd you do that? Okay. Our engineering department were responsible for supplying the intricate materials of one sort or another for the chemical division, for anybody that had any statistics. You see, G1, there's G1, G2, G3, and G4. That's division headquarters. G1 is personnel. G2 is enemy information. G3 is plans and training or combat operations. And G4 is supply. That's what makes up division headquarters. I had to get the daily reports out and read them to know where each division, each regiment went.
And this is for 18 months.
18 months of combat. And I don't know. You know, if Mitch were here, you know, I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know how I did that. I was all in 19. You know, I don't think I had that ability today. But somebody up there liked me, you know. So I did it. And in Stuttgart, see, the Corps of Engineers made contact with a German lithographer. His name was Schlesinger. He owned it. And his place was untouched. It wasn't damaged during the war. And he had all the printing presses that needed. All he needed was paint and paper.
So you were able to make this history in the field?
I stayed in the headquarters, and I used. I went to this German lithographer. He spoke English pretty well, with someone from the Corps of Engineers. They supplied the paper, the paint, and the gasoline to clear the presses with. I knew nothing about color separation, mind you. When the year I was studying the history of art and costume design, all that, right? So this German told me, you're going to need four colors to do this. And he told me how to make each color separation. In other words, if I want a black border, I'd have to use one sheet. If I wanted to use the color blue, I'd have to use another sheet. And then he puts them all together and he prints. That's what lithography is. So 3 months, 12 hours a day, I worked on that. And I finished them, and we made 15,000 copies of 5 each package. That went to everybody in the 100th Division, and if they were back home, they were mailed to them.
I'm sure quite a few of those 100th Division guys still have them.
Yeah, they do. I came back when nobody was looking. I had 15 of them leather bound at a German leather company. That was for the general staff, all of the general and all the way down to the regimental commanders and so forth. Only what they didn't know, I put 3 of them in my duffel bag.
As you should, you earned it.
Huh?
As you should.
Right. Now, the colonel left right after that. He left the division. He had another assignment. I think he went to Washington. I didn't see him after that. There's another story attached, but I tell you the truth, I just soon forget about it. So, I come out of the service, and I went back to school, and
were you able to have your school paid for by the GI Bill?
yeah, I had the school. It was paid for. You had a choice of starting a business, buying a home at a 4% mortgage, or getting your college. So I chose the latter.
Where'd you go to school?
Parsons School of Design.
And if we can go back a little bit.
Yes.
Where were you when your service ended? Where were you discharged?
I was discharged for Camp Miles Standish in Virginia.
And what was your homecoming like? What was it like to come back to Connecticut?
Well, my family had moved from one home to another, so I didn't know exactly where it was.
Is that when you moved to Connecticut?
No. I lived in Jersey.
Okay.
I lived in Jersey. My folks were from Jersey. My mother was born and raised in Colchester, so I lived there for 3 years. But I ended up coming back, obviously. But I went after VE Day. After I finished the maps, I had enough points prior to me staying the extra 3 months. I had enough time to leave then. The colonel asked me to stay on. He went back, but it was over. No, he stayed until I finished the maps, and then he quit. Then he left. So
what was your homecoming like? What was it like coming back?
Well, I had a new baby brother, which I didn't know about. He's going to be here this coming Saturday, too. The 20 years difference between us.
And what did you do in the days and the weeks after you got home?
I got home. I got oriented pretty well. There was a new home. I had a new little baby brother, and I went back to school, and I got very quickly changed into civilian life. Didn't have any problem doing that. Saw a lot of my friends that I hadn't seen in many years. One of them was killed. Yeah, my friend. One of them was killed. They never found him. He was killed. He was a pilot on a B-17 somewhere over the English Channel. I think that his name was Paul Dixon. They never found the body, but he was killed, and a couple of them were wounded.
Did you make any close friendships in the service?
Yeah, I made a lot of close friends. Yeah, my old MP, Tim Wilkins, wonderful guy.
Did you maintain those friendships after the war?
Yeah, we maintained them for. As a matter of fact, they moved to. We'll hopefully see them shortly. They moved to Virginia with their family. And there's an interesting individual in my section. I think your folks would know about this. My best friend, I had a lot of friends. My closest friend was a gentleman by the name of Al Blozis, Blozis. He was an All-American from Georgetown. He played for the New York Giants in 1938, I think. He was killed over there. Al was killed over there. He was my best buddy. Fella, okay, wait a minute. Bill Baker, William Baker. He was Shirley Booth's husband, the actress Shirley Booth. Your folks would know about Shirley Booth. That was he was Shirley Booth's husband.
And he was in the 100th division.
He was in the 100th division with me. Yeah, he was my best friend there. He was one of the typists.
And what did you go on to do as a career after your service ended?
Well, I stuck to the art field. I worked as a designer for several display companies. And then I started a business on my own, which I stayed in for several years. And then I worked for a food company as a marketing man. And then I paint. Now I'm an artist. Went back to my original.
And just a few questions about life in the service.
Okay.
In the service. So, while you were overseas, was there anything special you did for good luck?
No, I was never concerned. Once in a while, the only thing that would enter my mind, I periodically would say, "Am I ever going to get home from this? You know, what the outlook, how long it's going to take to defeat the Axis over there." That was the only thought that I ever had. But I was never really concerned. See, I was in a different atmosphere there. I was, it was a higher level. We were busy 24 hours a day, and I wasn't in a platoon fighting the cold weather up there and foxhole and all that kind of business. I went up there quite a bit, but to get some information. But I used to go down to battalion headquarters, and once I'd sneak down the company. That was a dangerous area, the company headquarters. I used to go to battalion, regimental headquarters, bring something down there. But
and how did people entertain themselves while they're overseas?
We had no entertainment whatsoever. There was no entertainment there. We never had a USO show. We couldn't. We weren't there in the staging area to Calais, France. And then we relieved the 45th, and then from then on it was combat. That was the whole story of the 100th Division. We never had USO shows or. I met General Patton.
Okay, would you care to describe that situation?
What's that?
Would you? Please go on.
Well, one day I was in the van and I was plotting. I'm sorry, I forgot that. I was plotting some information on the map, which is not too unusual for me. And all of a sudden, Colonel Eklund came in, and this guy walks in. He had a silver helmet on. It was Patton. And your folks will know who was along with him. Marlene Dietrich. She was a very, very famous actress.
That must have been quite a surprise.
Yeah, Patton came into our right. The van. You know how van, and he stood right next to me. And I looked up and I said, I hope he doesn't smack me in the face like he did that soldier that time. So he asked me if I had an overlay for him, and we had 12 copies, remember. I had a couple of left, and I gave him an overlay. He looked at the maps, and then they didn't spend too much time. But he looked over and he said, "Thank you." I said, "You're welcome, sir." And that was it. So I did meet Patton.
And did you ever get to go on any leave or?
Yeah, we went to. I went to Switzerland. We had there was a that leave is a little it's a little vague in my mind.
Was this after the war?
No. This was during. They sent people for arrest. Certain groups of people, believe it or not, they sent people back.
How long was your R&R? Do you recall 10 days?
No. It was I went with Paul Rizzo and Charlie Eibel and Reed. Rizzo he passed away. He was from Portchester. We went to Nancy, France. Nancy, Nancy, I think it is. They sent myself, Rizzo, and Reed for arrest, and we were there for 3 days. That's all it was. And they gave us a shower. We got new uniforms, all clean clothing. Anything you needed was done there, and then they sent us back. That was only 3 or 4 days.
Yeah,
They sent some of us back to get a little R&R. They had, and the meals were no different than what we had, but they were. It was nice to get back there. Had a nice shower and all that.
And do you recall anything you did on leave, or were there any? I remember you said you would get, if you needed dental work. Is there anything specific you remember from those 3 days, or was it just a break from the field?
It was just a break from the field. We just didn't have anything to do. They had a movie there, and we ate 3 regular army food, which was good, and we got all new clothing, new uniform. They sewed on our patches and all that business, and that's about it. That was just the only leave I had in 18 months.
And do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events that you witnessed or experienced while in the service?
Yes, it was very cold. I mean, this was like almost 10 above in Germany, and when we changed from one location to the other, I had an opportunity to. I didn't have to. We were looking for a house to stay in. I got permission from the colonel. If I wanted to, I could stay in the house. So, but we had to find a house. So we walked through this village, and we couldn't displace anybody.
Right.
You couldn't take a family in. So we walked into the house and didn't think anybody was there. So we said, "Oh, this is great." And then an old woman walked out, and she didn't speak any English. And we had a fellow his name was Lloyd. He says, "I can speak German." I said, "Great." And there was a potbelly stove. No the pipe, vent pipe. The stove was there, a pile of wood, no vent pipe. See, now we figure we're going to have a warm night, but how are you going to start a fire with no vent? So Lloyd says to us, "Don't worry, fellas." He says, "I can speak German. I'll have that lady get that vent pipe for us." I said, "Good, go ahead." So the woman comes out, and he says, "Haben Sie a pipe Sie for the hole Sie in the wall Sie?" You might want to put that in there as a bit of humor, I always tell that joke when I'm giving a speech at the high schools, We almost killed him. I mean, he almost had 10 shots right there. But the woman got it, and we had a warm night. That was great. So you got a little humor mixed in there. Yeah.
And do you remember any pranks or any practical jokes that?
Well, we had a guy. His name was. We called him Jeep. He was always looking to take a Jeep when we were back camping, and he was sort of mischievous, and I don't think he's around. He couldn't be court-martialed anymore anyway. He used to. he'd go into the general had special food, usually, was kept separate, and they had loaves of American cheese, the 5 pound loaf. So he was a great talker, he's from New York, so he must have known the chef, and he'd always come back with a 5 pound loaf, and he would throw it on top of the van. You see, so nobody could see it in the state. Then we'd have to get up and get it. So we always had a nice slug of American cheese.
And what did you think of the officers, the enlisted men that you served with?
I thought they were very competent. One was questionable. One was pretty nasty. His name was Kerr, and he was very nasty. He was finally transferred out.
What were his negative qualities?
He was very sarcastic, and we were having a lecture. He was conducting it, and I had a very, very bad strep throat, and it was awful. I couldn't swallow. My eyes were tearing, and I was sitting in the front row, and I had a fever. I was in terrible, terrible condition. I went to the infirmary, and they didn't have anything to give me. And I was sitting there, and my eyes were watering. He said to me, "What's the matter, Schuman? You homesick or something?" And I wasn't in any mood for that, whether he was an officer or not. I didn't even have a stripe, And I said, "I don't think so." I said, "I have a sore throat. Maybe you'd like to have it," or something like that. So he reported me to the Captain Small. And I had to go up there and insubordinate. I says, "Well, I was sick, and I don't, I says I had a strep throat. My eyes were watering," and he made a comment that I didn't like. That's all. I said, "I don't care whether he's an officer or not." That's exactly what I said. And Small was a nice guy, so he said, "I'll put down, I give you some duty up here, but just don't do it again," and that was it. Well, he I don't know why, but he was transferred out. He might have had other complaints.
Did you keep a journal while you were overseas?
I have a daily report.
Reports.
Yeah, I have a copy for you too.
And I couldn't help but notice the mezuzah when I came in.
Right.
And so, how did you feel as a Jew in the European theater of operations after you learned of the genocide?
Yeah.
Camps?
That's a very, very good question. I'm going to give you the proper. I had full contempt for them. There's without doubt, and I saw many of the German prisoners. Focused in. They would march through our command post, and I saw a lot of dead Germans on the side of the road too. Didn't make me too unhappy. Really. I mean, that's going down to the basic thought that I had. But other than that, I didn't have too much time to think about it, because it wasn't brought up too much. We passed one concentration camp, and by that time it had been captured. But if I was captured at the time, that then at the time that they got my Jeep, I don't know what would have happened at that time. Some of the Jewish infantrymen were killed on the spot by the SS, or they were sent to concentration camps. A platoon leader or someone up to the front maybe he got captured, 3 or 4 left in the platoon, and you had the dog tags, and they would check your dog tags. See? It's against the law to change your dog tags anyway. But I didn't give it much thought, except during the end of the war when we were there, and there were thousands of German prisoners, and they would walk by the building and they were in, and I looked at them a little contempt, but that's about all. There were thousands of them that were captured. It's a good thought you had there. I knew it existed, but so all of these things just it was part of the scenario, the Germans and the whole kit and caboodle there didn't.
Were you aware of the genocide while you were
Yes.
Before VE?
Oh yeah. We knew about that, and I was concerned about that as well. And then, of course, when I got back to the States, we learned a lot more. We learned a lot more. I was very comfortable in the Army. There were only in all of division headquarters, there were only three Jews in between G1 and G4. 2 of them were myself and Jeep Miller, and one other.
Did you ever feel any discrimination?
No, none whatsoever. The colonel would not have put up with that. He was from Nebraska. You could classify him would have some anti-Semitic feelings, but never did I ever hear anything that. And the 3 officers under him, I never heard it in the whole time I was in. Even in the barracks, I never heard that. So we were never faced with it. As I said, I never once did I hear any comment from any one of my guys in the barracks. Never. No officer, although they wouldn't do that, hopefully, but yeah. That was it. So, no, I was quite comfortable.
So, how did your military experience influence your thinking about war, or the way you think about the military in general?
I have great respect for the military.
And
I think that we had very, very competent, well-educated officers in division headquarters. And Eklund was a regular Army man, and he was a superb officer.
Difficult to work with, but a superb officer.
Difficult to work with, but if you did your job with the proper attitude, conscientious, dressed properly, nothing to worry about. And I didn't know the whole while that he felt very highly of me. So at the time, I knew that he was somebody that deserved respect, and because he was a real officer.
Did you ever see him again?
Oh yeah, oh yes. It took me a long while to look him up. I finally found him in Washington. Went to see him. Invited him to one of our conventions, and he came. My wife met him, and he always wanted me to go back in the Army with him.
For a regular Army guy, that must be quite the compliment.
He did. He called up. When I lived in Jersey, he called me up, and I went down to Fort Bragg to see him. Yeah.
Did you ever think about re-enlisting?
No, I met my beautiful wife when I was going back to college, and I knew it wasn't a lifestyle for her. But it was very flattering and very hard for me to turn it down, because with this man, I could have gone. He was an officer, and working in his staff was the way to go. I could have come out, with a high rank and so forth. But it wasn't for my wife at all, and I couldn't subject her to that lifestyle. Yeah.
And did you join any veterans organizations?
Yeah, Jewish War veterans.
Okay.
Oh, I was president of the 100 Infantry Association for 2 years.
And how regular were the reunions?
Once a year. We just disbanded the organization about 2 months ago for lack of attendance. You know, there's a 1,500 World War II veterans dying every day. So I don't know how many are left, but so we only had about 120 the last time. And the progeny made up the 300 that we had there. You know, the guys would bring their grandchildren, a brother or somebody, so they made up the 300, but there were only actually 120 of us. So I got a letter from that they had to disband it. But we donated money to VMI and to a couple of high school, military high school, I forget what that was, and some other monies.
And you said that there was quite the honor bestowed on you. Hasn't BMI added your maps to their permanent collection?
They're at the General George Marshall Museum. That's in Virginia. My maps are there. My maps are at Fort Jackson, Fort Bragg, Fort Benning, and the Carlisle, Pennsylvania barracks.
Now, did you ever meet General Marshall?
No.
And how did your service and experiences affect your life?
It gave me a big sense of responsibility. Good work ethic. And an overall respect for people.
Now, is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered in this interview, or you feel is significant to your story, and would like to have?
I think that it's significant to the story. Could I run by something?
Absolutely.
Without being recorded?
Now, is there anything you'd like to add that's not been covered in this interview?
Yes, I think we did discuss the maps that I did. A very interesting story about the gentleman who was the official printer for the German army. His name was Schlesinger. And he had a very nice establishment, which was in Stuttgart, not too far from the house that we were occupying. And one day he opened up a drawer and he showed me some letters. And when I look back, I think I made an error, but honest John, I decided not to. He showed me a couple of letters. One of them was actually signed by Adolf Hitler. And there were some other generals. Names were on there. I just can't remember. Rommel was not one of them. But when I saw that signature, I think back, I think he would have offered to me, and I just didn't bother. Honest John, I should have definitely taken one of those letters. I can't look back now, so we just laugh about it. Anyway, if I walked home and my mother saw that, she might have thrown me out of the house with a letter from him. Okay, did we cover anything about the Legion of Merit in there?
The what?
The Legion of Merit?
No.
We didn't discuss it. We discussed it, but we didn't go into detail.
No. You had just mentioned it as a story from Colonel Eklund. But
about him recommending me?
Before you left before you returned to Washington.
Before he returned to Washington, he recommended me for the Legion of Merit.
Yes.
And unfortunately, without his knowledge, obviously, One day I was at the headquarters, a major from the Adjutant General's office, who I think he told me he drove 40 miles or so to look me up. He was rather concerned. He showed me the recommendation that Eklund had, that Colonel Eklund had written, and it said not recommended at this time with an H, and that this major, who happened to be Jewish, told me that that H stood for Hebrew, and the reason he told me he couldn't do much about the situation then, but he recommended that I to correct this injustice was to contact the colonel when I got back to the States, which I did, and he wrote me another letter, a very nice letter, with the same recommendation. And since that time, I have been trying to contact the proper people, but it's been unsuccessful. I've been to some of the senators, and I have not come to any successful conclusion with my request. It's still an open issue.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, still an open issue. Now Blumenthal has it. And they see what they do, they turn it over to one of their aides who doesn't even know where to start. There's a certain protocol that you have to. One of the issues is that I got the Bronze Star. That was given to me in conjunction with a couple of other things that I did, but he also mentioned the fact that I did those maps, and that's one of the reasons, among others, that he recommended me for the Bronze Star. That might be one of the reasons that there's been a delay, because you can't be awarded something twice for the same episode. But this is a completely different issue, completely different. The time span on it is different, and so we let it go at that. And we're still trying to get to the bottom of this thing. I'm 89 now, and maybe I'll get a pleasant surprise one day.
I hope for your sake that you do.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Mr. Schuman, thank you for your service, and thank you for taking the time to do this interview today.
It's been my pleasure. I enjoyed doing it with you, really. You're very attentive and sensitive to this. I think you really appreciate, what the World War veterans did, and the personnel that are still out there defending our country.
I hope that for generations to come, people will take the time to enjoy this interview and to share in some of your experiences.
Well, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.